All right, the next thing I want to improve here is how we look up a rental. I don't quite like the way we are finding a rental in this code. Imagine if somewhere else in the application wanted to look up a rental, then we would have to call this find1 method and pass an object with these two properties. It's a little bit inconvenient. Let me show you a better way. Wouldn't it be nicer if we could get a rental like this? Rental dot lookup. This method takes two parameters, customer ID and movie ID. Then we would await it and get the rental object here. Which approach is better? Obviously the first one. So in this lecture, I'm going to show you how to add this lookup method in the rental class. Now, before we get started, I want to clear some terminology. In object-oriented programming, we have two types of methods: static methods and instance methods. A static method is a method that is available directly on a class. So in this case, you have this rental class. This lookup method is what we call a static method. In contrast, an instance method is one that is available on an object or an instance of a class. So earlier, we added an instance method to our user class. So we can create a new user and call generate auth token. So this method is an instance method because it's only available on an instance of a class, on an object. Now, we use instance methods when we are working with a particular object, and the result that we will get will be dependent on that object. We use a static method when we are not working with a particular object. That's why they're available on a class. So in this lecture, you're going to learn how to add a static method to the rental class. Now let's delete this. Let's go to the rental model. So rental. All right, this is how we define a rental model. Now we need to extract this schema object so we can add a method to it. So let's select all this code, cut it. So here we're going to pass a constant called rental schema. And we initialize that here. Rental schema. We set that to this code. So rental schema is a new Mongoose schema. Now, once we create the schema, to add a static method here, we write code like this. Rental schema. Here we have a property called statics. This returns an object, and in this object we can define the static methods in the rental class. So here we add a new key. Let's call that lookup. That's the name of our method. We set it to a function. This function should take two parameters, customer ID and movie ID. Now we can go back to our returns module and cut this ugly code and move it right here. Now, here we don't need to define a separate constant. We're going to return the result immediately. Also, we don't need to await. We can simply return the promise that we get here and let the caller of the lookup method await that promise. And finally, we need to replace rental with this. So here, this will reference the rental class. Okay. Now, once again, remember, because we're using this, we cannot use the arrow function syntax. We explored that before. So now we have this new static method. Let's go back to our returns module. We just need to make a simple change here. These arguments, they're available in the body of the request. So we need to prefix them with request.body. Like this. So now let's save the changes and see if all our tests will continue to pass. Back in the terminal, our tests failed. And here's the error. Request is not defined. So again, this is the benefit of having automated tests. While doing this refactoring, I made a mistake. And these tests told me immediately that this refactoring is not working. If we didn't have these tests, we would have to fire up Postman and keep calling this endpoint with different values to make sure all different edge cases are working. This is very tedious. And the problem is, as our application grows larger and larger, manually testing all these execution paths becomes very costly and sometimes impossible. So it is possible that you deploy your application to the production and sometimes you have bugs you are not aware of. And this can be very costly to the business that is using your software. That's why we write automated tests. Yeah, it takes some time, it requires some effort, some learning curve, but these tests help us catch bugs earlier in the software development lifecycle. So, back here, this error is raised in our rental schema.statics.lookup method. So here's our lookup function. This is the mistake. I forgot to remove request.body here. Delete. Save. Let's run the test again. All tests are passing. Beautiful.